I'm doing something a little different for this Blue Squadron series. Instead of doing some X-Wing miniatures models, I'm actually doing an Armada Super Star Destroyer. I based this teardown process on an excellent teardown instruction post by FFG forum member Fistful of Force. Local Austin Armada player Paul Conrad will be taking this model to Houston for the Prime Tournament in January 2020. Paul, if you're watching this, take a deep breath as I take an X-Acto knife to your firstborn child! We'll start by removing the bridge. I tried using some pliers to remove just the conning tower of the bridge, but it turns out that if you pull hard enough on the block that it's attached to, it just comes free. Next, we have to flip it to the underside and remove all of the cover panels for the screws that hold the top and bottom halves together. We'll start at the nose with the hexagon-shaped panel. The clips for this panel are on the left and right side of the panel. I tried using Fistful of Force's recommended method of working in an X-Acto blade into the panel to release the tabs, and then pulling the blade out using a pair of vice grips. I didn't really have much success with this method, so I tried working the panel with my X-Acto knife. I'm not sure I'd recommend this method because it resulted in a lot of broken X-Acto blades and a little bit of damage to the outside hull of the Star Destroyer. Also, I have to apologize for using a lot of my hands and not a lot of the Star Destroyer in this video. I'm using a new camera setup. Obviously, I don't have really good control on the lighting, the focus, or the positioning just quite yet. There was a lot of slow and steady progress with working out the panel until finally I just managed to get it to pop free. Word of caution, if you break the tip of the blade off inside of the panel, when that panel breaks free, the tip of the blade will go flying out. Next, we'll move to two panels that are just below where the stand attaches to the Star Destroyer. The clips for these panels are on the left and right side. I had a really hard time with this panel, and I think it's because I was trying to remove it from the outside rather than working my blade into the inside of the panel. This process may very well be easier if you have two X-Acto knives and you're working both the left and right sides of that panel. In fact, this panel was so tight that when it popped out, it went flying clear across the room. There's another one on the other side just like it, and this time I wised up and tried working it from the inside rather than from the outside. The last set of panels on this section of the hull are located just in front of the engines. The clips for these tabs are on the front and back of the panels. I tried working this one from the back side going forward. You'll notice that this time I'm being a little more deliberate with this panel. I'm scraping at the gap to try to widen it so that it fits the blade a little bit better. In addition, I'm using a screwdriver to provide myself a little bit of leverage to pry out the panel without damaging the rest of the hull. Now to remove the panel on the other side. The engine nozzle clusters also serve as screw covers. There's a straight seam where you can stick a blade in between the front and back half of the engines. There's a set of two lateral clips deep inside of the engine housing, but they're not that hard to remove. Once you slide your blade down into them, they release pretty easily. Here's a freeze frame of the housing showing all the clips. Notice the two lateral clips, and then there's one side clip. The side clip means you'll have to pry on the inside of the engine housing upwards and then work it towards the outside of the ship. Here's a better shot of that seam that I was using to remove the engine housing on the other side of the ship. The next set of engines have two engines per housing. This time the seam isn't just a straight line. In fact, where the clip is inside of the little piece of plastic between the two engine nozzles. You'll notice that I'm working this one front to back. And once again, the other side is the same as the first one. I'd really like to give a big shout out to Fistful of Force, whoever you are, because your instructions were really invaluable for taking apart the Star Destroyer. There are a few more screws on the back part of the Star Destroyer, but you can actually remove the front part of the bottom hull at this point once you remove the rectangular screw covers. There are still small plastic clips holding the top and bottom halves of the Star Destroyer together. I found that the easiest way to pry apart the top and bottom halves was to not actually apply force to the seam in between the two halves of the Star Destroyer, but to insert a screwdriver into the holes where I had removed the screw covers. By pushing down into the Star Destroyer onto the top hull from the inside, it allowed me to apply pressure on the clips and release them without bending the top hull. Man, it's a really good thing I remember to wear pants while shooting this video from that angle. Removing the front half of the bottom hull allowed me to give a little tug on the tail section, and then figure out exactly how many screws I still had yet to remove. The next screw cover is a tiny chevron-shaped piece of plastic almost at the very tail. It's a little bit hard to see right now, but you'll see when I remove that piece of plastic. I incorrectly thought that the clips were on the front and back of that piece of plastic, but it turns out they were on the left and right. Once again, here's a freeze frame so you can see it just a little bit better. The last three engine nozzles you see here are part of a large rectangular panel. There are some thick plastic clips holding the entire thing together, but if you've removed portions of the Star Destroyer already, you should have a little bit of flexibility with which to open up those seams. It's worth noting that you will still have to use your X-Acto knife and insert it into the seam that's just in front of the peg holder where the stand goes into the Star Destroyer. Once you've pried your blade deep into the Star Destroyer at that point, you should be able to undo those clips and remove that center engine block. Removing the center engine block exposes two last screws. I'm planning on using that rectangular space inside of the Star Destroyer to house some of the electronics that will drive the LED system. This area happens to lie underneath the bridge block on the top half of the hull. I'll replace the plastic clips on the bridge block with magnets so that it's easy to remove. That'll allow me to add a hidden power switch and a USB charging port for the Star Destroyer. The rest of the Star Destroyer comes apart easily at this point, including the top city blocks as well as the bottom half of the tail. Subscribe to this channel to watch further videos where I'm going to add LEDs to the engine nozzle, a controller system, as well as fiber optics. Once again, big shout out to Paul Conrad for letting me do surgery on his Star Destroyer, and an even bigger shout out to Fistful of Force on the FFG forums for his excellent teardown guide, which really helped in the process of disassembling the Super Star Destroyer. Thanks for watching!